Okay, it's my pleasure to be here. I get a call from Diane, and Nicodem wants me to come give a talk, so I just double my price I usually charge just because it's Nicodem. Okay, and I didn't pat you down, so there's no throwing things or heckling, because I know a lot of you in here, unfortunately, okay? Okay, I want to spend a little time talking about some of the things we see what's going on in the industry today. And we have a pretty large database, about 1.5 million sows in there most of the time. It's companies from U.S., Canada, Australia, and there's 8 farms now from Latin America. Started in 2005. Size of sows, 125 sows. There's some 11,000 sow units in here. Mostly independent pork producers. We have none of the megas or any of those people in our database. There's usually mostly independent hog producers. There's 26 different record programs that we get data out of and extract what we do to put into the benchmarking to get the data. We have a service agreement for privacy, so if you have data in our database, we don't share that with other people. We use it in the composites. Then there's an information sheet we usually have you fill out to tell us where you are. So just to recap, we will normally update our database in March for last year, 2019. So we did this data update through the middle of July last year. So top 10%, the next 20%, average of all farms, and bottom 30%. Now, when we say top 10%, it's those 79 farms, that's their averages. It's not top 10% in each category. It's those 79 farms that average those numbers. So just a few highlighted numbers. 31.61 pigs weaned per mated female, top 10%. Bottom 30%, 22.66. So basically 9 pigs difference in production. Total born, 1571 versus 1433. So again, a pig and a half difference in total born there. Weaned to first service, 5.43 days versus 7.71 on the bottom, average of 6.68. Farrowing rates, almost 90% versus 80%. Again, 10% difference in farrowing rates. Multiple matings, there's a difference. Gilt farrowing rates, 90.2%, 84.3%. So again, top 10% pretty well excel in about every one of the areas here, except what's interesting, replacement rate, 61% versus 65% on the bottom, 30%. Then we look at more on total numbers, total born of P1s, which drives a lot of production numbers, 14.8 versus 13.41. Through 3 parities, 46.44 pigs versus 42. Pigs weaned per female farrowed is 12.71 for the top, 10.33 here. So a difference, again, of about a pig and a half there of what's going on. And Piglet Survival is a number we created several years ago. We're working with a group. They had a bonus program. They said, we're going to really get this pre-weaning mortality to go down. So we tracked it for a while, went down about 4%. Got to looking at the pigs out the back door, it's about the same. So all of a sudden, stillborns went up half a pig. So which bucket did you put the dead pig in? So that's where the Piglet Survival number came from. So it's 100% minus pre-weaning death loss minus stillborn. So it's a survival number. So 84% for the top 10, 74 here. So 10% difference in survivability in the farrowing house. Pre-weaning, 10.5 versus 18. And gestation length the same, and weaning age is almost identical, just around 21 days. So I kind of come up with some numbers. People say, well, I got to make improvement in my farm. So I come up with some ratio numbers that we created. So if I can change sow death loss 1%, that's about 0.25 pigs per sow per year. If I can change farrowing rate 1%, that's about 0.34. And if I change piglet survival based on 15 pigs total born by 1%, that's 0.36 pigs. So if I want to gain a pig, if I lower my sow death loss by 4%, that's a pig. Farrowing rate change of 3% is a pig. A change in piglet survival of 3% is a pig. So again, a lot of these farms, it's not one big thing that's going to make the change. It's a little bit of 3 or 4 different things that's going to make the improvement that you need. This has been our pigs weaned per mated female trend line for the last 14.5 years. We started out here as far as all numbers is the red. We started out about 21 pigs, about 26.5. We gained just a little under 5 pigs in that period of time. Top 10% went from a 24 to a 31.6. But look what happened. This is through July of 2019. Look what happened in 18 as far as these numbers dropping off. We saw they all averaged, but the top 10% farms, we saw a big drop-off in pigs weaned per mated female. There's several other production numbers we'll go through. We saw the same drop-off. I am really not sure what went on or what happened. We looked at total born. That's potential. So there's farms out there that's having almost 40 pigs total born as far as what we have to work with. But again, look what happened in 18 and started to maybe come back a little bit in 19, but again, it dropped off, especially on the top farms. And then the distribution. This is what continues to amaze me. There are farms at less than 18 pigs weaned per male to female, farms where we got one farm sitting out there at 34. These are just pigs. They're biologically came from the same sources, but how can you have that much spread? Same thing on total born. There are some farms out there that have 42 total born pigs. There's some farms at 22. Now, some of these farms in here we're going to give a little credit because we do a lot of work with the genetic companies on a lot of their terminal cross farms, Durocs and stuff like that. So yeah, they're going to be down here. But that's not all these farms, okay? So I want to break this up. I got about 6 things. I want to chat just a few minutes about each of them, just to address what we see and some things maybe you can work on. Sow death loss, that's probably the hottest thing in the news today. Prolapses, sow death loss, what's happened. And it's been kind of interesting. Our trend line's been interesting to see what happened. This is trend lines. Again, the red is all farms. We started out, we didn't keep the first couple years of the data, but starting in 2006, we're about 9.5%. It worked its way down to about 7%, kind of crept along. Then starting about 2013-14, it started to really move up. And I'm not sure where that came from yet. But it really started to move up. And look at the top 10% farms. They kept driving. They were down under 6%. A lot of them under 5% for several years till about 2016. And then they started up with this last year being at 8%. And our average down the database is at 10. So what happened? What changed in the last 3 to 4 years that caused that to happen? I was on a meeting a couple years ago in the Carolinas, and a group from AgriStats was there and presented their data. And again, AgriStats would be more of the megas, whereas ours is not. We saw almost the same damn trend lines of the last 3 to 4 years, sow death loss going up. So it's not just happening to the small farm, it's happening across the whole country. Now, remember about 350,000 of that data is from Canada that's in that 1.5 million. But still, they've seen the same thing happening up there. They've seen their sow death losses move up too. And we see a range in there. We've got farms less than 2% in the database and farms at 22%. So 23% of the sow farms this last year had 12% sow death loss or higher. That's a lot of sows. So we did some breaking out of data sets, and we started to look at where is this coming from, what's the cause. So in our data sets, we have top 10%, and this is the big database, 1.5 million. Top 10% would be farms that's over 30 pigs weaned per mated female per year. The bottom 30% would be, 20, 21 pigs weaned per mated female per year. And this is size of farm. So we break our data set up into size. Less than 1,000, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4+ thousand sows. And you can look, the top end farms on production had the lowest sow death losses. It's the farms that had the lower production numbers that had higher, and the highest one was these sow farms between 2,000 and 3,000 sows had the highest death loss across the board. So size really didn't make any difference to sow death. It was productivity that helped keep it lower. We also left culls and deaths by parity, and this one kind of surprised us a little bit. I just put the slide up here, pardon me. Put the slide up on death loss by parity. SMS here would represent that 1.5 million sows. The 17 farms here are some farms we do a lot of work with in our office, so we feel it's good data. The 12 farms came from a system that I work with. They allowed me to use their data in the data sets. So you can see here the death loss of the first 3. These are zeros, ones, and twos. Now, on the zeros, not everybody enters those gilts when they hit the farm, right? Most of you enter them when you breed them. So we really probably didn't have a true look at death loss of gilts in this area. But when you add the 3 together, excuse me, in the SMS database, 50% of the death loss that year came from 0, 1, and 2 parities. It's not the older ladies in the farm. We looked at the subset. They were at 40%. The 12-farm system, they were at 47%. We looked the same thing if we look at culls. About 45% of the culls are all P0s, 1s, and 2s. So which animals are dying? It's the young parities. It's not the old parity females in the system. We also tried to look at time. When does this occur? So we pulled 37 farms out of a data set. We took a look at it and said, in this period of time from day 115 to day 123, accounted for 30% of the sow death loss in a 9-day period of time. Just think about how many of those gals right before or right after the farrow or we remove them from the farrow houses. So again, it's that 9-day period of time, about 30%. So we know when it kind of happens, what do we have to do about it? Then I also looked at death loss reasons. Excuse me. And again, something hard to do because you all got this unique set of death loss reasons and culling reasons, right? When I pulled this together, it was forget how many. I used 17 farms. Again, we had good data on. But there were 55 reasons for deads, 33 reasons for destroyed, and 65 reasons for culling. Okay, so what do you make of that? So we combined them together, ended up with 13 categories. The biggest thing is here, unknown or other accounted for 25% of the death losses. So it tells us nothing if 25% of it we don't know anything about. Okay, so I do think the industry's got to start to think about some common set of death loss reasons in culling, get it down to a manageable number so we can start to really look at the data. When we looked at it, our biggest issue was lambs and injuries. Overall, combined death loss and culls amounted for 7.12% of the animals were going out from lameness or injury. So is that from selection? Is that from pens? What is going to cause that to happen? And so then we think there's some area there that we can do some work on. And I don't know how many of you do much with trimming toes and dew claws, but that's something that's got to be coming to part of your vocabulary. You may not have to spend $10,000 for a lift station to do it, but you can take some pruners and you can go in and you do some trimming. And good looking feet here, a dew claw that got ripped off in a pen gestation. What happens to most of those sows when they get ripped off? They end up either as a cull or we ended up destroying them. Okay, look at these dew claws here. That actually grows back into the foot. Okay, and then here's some we chopped off a toe a little bit. They look crude. It's not a great pedicure, but at least we get them evened up and we cut off the dew claws back here. As a rule of thumb, we want to cut the dew claws off where the coronary band, which is this line between where the hair and the claw is, we cut them off right there. We're seeing probably 75% of our injuries to feet and legs in the loose sow housing barns being from dew claws. They get ripped off, tore apart, tore off, or something like that. So got some farms working, especially one. We try to trim the toes when they're in the farrowing house. And so we go in, we mark the ones that need trimming, and we trim them up and they head back out. And I think in that particular farm, we probably dropped sow death loss 3% just when we went to doing foot care maintenance, because that was the animals that we were losing. Okay, so just some summary on this sow death loss. Basically, no standards or reasons for female rules, so it's hard to analyze and compare farms. The top 10% farms have the lower sow death loss. Those 2,000 to 3,000 sow farm have the highest percent death loss in culling. Data shows us the younger parities that are dying. Is it not good gilt development? Is it not good selection? What are we doing wrong? History saw an increase in prolapse, and we're not even going to go there on that, but that was an issue from last year. The only thing that really came out of that study now that they're looking back is sow farms that had treated water systems had lower prolapses. So there's a secondary study going on right now where they're going into some farms, putting in water treatment systems. They're going to start monitoring the ones that had high prolapse issues. So hopefully in 6 months we'll have some kind of numbers to talk about. But that was one of the main things that came out of that study. Okay, and data shows increasing females being culled and euthanized due to feet and leg injuries. So that's what's gone up. So I think a lot of it comes back to gilt selection. Are we spending enough time developing or working with our gilts? And I love this slide. That's all the things we need to be looking at when we develop a gilt. We don't just take her, put her in a truck, throw her in a barn outside somewhere, isolate her 2 weeks, hope she got fed, and bring her in and start breeding on her. All these things together make a whole lot of difference. There's some studies now that tell us that the first 40 days that the gilt is in the mother sow sets her lifetime productivity. Way back to when it starts, okay? And the birth weight of the gilt has a lot to do with productivity. So things like that we need to take into consideration as we try to do a better job on gilt development. All these things need to be a part of your plan when you're working. And we see a lot of the newer farms that went up are finally investing money and people and time into gilt development, getting them in earlier, developing, feeding them right, doing the things that are correct. And again, a lot of it's selection. uneven toes, pasterns that are straight, or legs straight up and down, underlines that are wrong. We got to do a better job, and sometimes when these animals come in, you may have to write reject on the back of them. But I need them to breed, right? I can get one litter out of them. You know, I need to bring them in. I think we got to stop doing some of that stuff. I threw this one in about underlines, and as we've gotten more productive and our genetic companies have gave us a lot more total born, we've seen some things happen. Average birth weights have gone down. We've seen an increase in pre-weaning death loss and things like that. So this was a nice piece I liked. Sows that had less than 14 nipples versus sows that had 17. I just want a couple things. Look at the colostrum production. They had about 11 pounds of colostrum available to the pigs here. We had almost 16 pounds right here. Piglet Survival was 76% versus 90%. We weaned a 10.3 versus a 12.1. So again, how many functional nipples do some of these sows have? They may look like they're 16 or 18 there, but how many are functional that we've got to work with? So I think we've got to do a better job of understanding that and getting our genetic companies getting us functional nipples, just not counts. And I think we got a little carried away with that. What about wean to first service? To me, this has been one of the biggest drivers. It's been fun for 18 years kind of having a company. We can look at a lot of this kind of stuff. We've looked a lot at wean to first service interval. And this is what's happened over time. This is, remember, the all line is the red. So actually over time, over the 14 years in this case, it's worked its way down. But look what happened back in about 2012 or 13 with the top 10%. We saw a big dive down, and they've been sitting under about 5 days for a long time now. It had a little blurb last year. What changed back about 2011-12 in feeding sows? What changed? What did you all change? Self-feeders? Feed them more times a day? How many of you went to that? Okay? We finally figured out if we feed the dang things, they'll perform well for us. And that's what was holding us back a lot of times on that wean to first service interval. And we know if the wean to first service interval is low, what happens to farrowing rate? It's higher. We also know subsequent litter size is higher. So that's a big driver in determining what's going to happen. But we still see farms that are 14-day average wean to first service. But you can see the large number of sow farms now that are under 6 days here, and there's actually a few that's under 5 days here as far as wean to first service. A lot of my top-end farms I work with, we're under 5 days on wean to first service. That's the key to getting them bred back and getting subsequently large litters on the next time. And I threw this data set in. We sorted out a data set. This is 1 million sows in the data set when we did this. And we basically sorted them based on wean to first service day of the P1s. So this is the lowest at 4.7. There were some gilts in there that had P1s at 13.2. In this case, there were 13 farms that we pulled out of the, I think it was 513, that had gilts recycling in 4.7 days. Look how the rest of the farm went on recycles. There were 83 farms here that averaged 13.2 days to get their gilts back into heat. And look how much higher the other parities are. Gilts can come in heat under 6 days. It's possible. I got several farms I work with where we see that. Again, how do we feed them in the farrowing house? How do we feed them from weaning till breeding determines what's going to happen there. And this drives her next litter in productivity. So, optimum feeding in the farrowing house. You know, different options out there. Many different ones been used to cutting off gestation boxes and PVC pipe and a little weld to them. That's stuff we did back. That's 2008 this was taken. We were doing things way back then as far as feeding the sows more. So again, they'll eat more. They have more pigs. You know, we need to have more feed that's sitting in them. And farrowing. I want to spend a couple minutes on farrowing. How many of your employees at your farm have seen a boar do a natural mating? Probably not very many of them, right? Something we've kind of forgot about. What's natural? And everything is done artificially. We've seen farrowing rate go up this last several years. We started out at about 80% here on the all. It got up and plateaued at about 85% right here. Then we actually saw, again, this drop-off in 18, and it really hasn't even turned back around yet. So I'm anxious to get the second half of 19 in the database to see if this turns back up. It happened also in the top 10% farm. So what happened in 18 that dropped farrowing rate on 1.5 million sows? I don't have the answers. I've got some thoughts, but I don't really have the answers to that one. Okay. And what's the potential? You know, we have sow farms less than 70% farrowing rate. We got a few farms at 95. There's a lot more sitting at 90 plus is becoming a little more common. But I think we've had one sow farm for a year run at 96. So again, once we get up in the 90s here, that's what farrowing rate's going to be. We're not going to see, you may see 100% weak once in a while, but 95, 96 is going to be the top end farms as far as farrowing rate. Just too many things happening from when a boar's collected to when you get the semen into the sow. Think of all the touch points that have to happen during that period of time. And then I look at farrowing rate as a three-part triangle: the sow, the semen, and the person. So if that's a three-part triangle, if I have a 90%, if it's 90% up here for the sow, 90% for the semen, 90% for the person, what's the farrowing rate? Is it 90? 73. Okay, so if one of those is having a bad day, if this guy comes in with the flu, whether it be bottle flu or regular flu, and has a bad day, he can affect what happens in there. So all these three things have to be working together to get it done. I would like to challenge the Boar Studs a little bit in here. There's a study done back in 2013. They had 190 boars that they had in a study, and they bred single sire mated 35 to 50 gilts or sows with each one of those boars. They went back and looked at the farrowing rates. You can see there were some boars in there had farrowing rates down at about 52%, not very many. Several boars here under 90%. Then there were some boars on this other end that had like 98, 99% farrowing rates. So how do you differentiate those boars in a boar stud? We're not doing any single sire matings, right? So what if I get semen from a couple of these guys over here in my batch of semen? Will I expect to get 98% farrowing rates? They will dilute that out in pooled semen. So I kind of challenge the Boar Studs. There need to be some matings done down here to see how good these boars are or not good. So if farrowing rate's lower, normally total born's lower too. Okay, now in bulls, there's a test for fertility. There's no such test in boars so far. We can't just grab a thing of semen and test it for fertility and say you're good or you're bad. Okay? And these low fertility boars, when we go to more PCAI and half dosing, are affected even more by the half dosing. Okay? Piglet Survival. What are we going to do with those extra pigs? Weaning age, we've seen in our database over this period of time, go from about 18 days. We're up sitting around 20 to 21 days now. Again, the top-end farms and the averages all went up. We had some quicks in there, but they all went up and down. This one right there, well, that's that 13. The one back here at 13 was the PED thing. Pigs weaned per female farrowed. We've gone from weaning, the all average is a little 9 pigs up to 11.3 pigs. Top 10% went from 10 pigs to weaning just up about 12.7, what they weaned here. Now, but look what happened in weanings. That lasted in 18. So again, about every slide we look at on production, something happened at 18. Again, not totally sure what that is. Here's our Piglet Survival slide. Remember the equation, 100 minus, pre-weaning minus stillborns. And again, top 10%, it's gone down. Total born's gone up. Survival's gone down. This 13 bleep right there, that's PED. We estimate at that time about 65% of the sow farms in our database had PED. They put a big hole in things. Okay. But look what happened here. We've been going along, top 10%, and the spread is wider. But what happened last year in these top 10% farms, it caused a drop of about 2.5% in Piglet Survival. So it wasn't just the breeding. Something happened in those farms. And again, we got spreads. Farms with 0.2 stillborns, farms with 2.2. Pre-weaning mortality, farms at 4%, farms at 24%. Even with a health break, a PERS or a PED, how can you get to 24% pre-weaning mortality in the farrowing house for a year? Because all this is year data. Okay. Haven't shared this slide with anybody yet. You get to be the first group on it. I've been working on this stillborn thing for a long time. And stillborns have always been a peeve with me because they're usually a bigger pig. If I can get him out, his survivability is extremely good. Okay, so how do we lower stillborn pigs? I have a farm I work with, it's 4,500. It's a multiplier for a genetics company. Total borns are sitting right at 17 pigs. I read an article about 3 years ago now, from Denmark that talked about meal feeding sows before they farrow. Feeding them broke up periods of time. Not full feeding them, feeding them meal time before they farrow. So I took it to this group, and I said, okay, here's what I want to try. And we're going to feed sows at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're going to get 1.5 pounds of diet, so a total of 6 pounds per day. This will start the day or two before they farrow. We started doing that in March of 2018, right here. And we were running about 1.5 to 1.36 stillborns. We chopped it down to 0.67 when we started doing this. Now, they have a graduated cylinder in there that they feed in. It holds so many pounds of feed and has a clam on the bottom. So you just walk by, you give them 1.5 pounds. The next time you walk by, you give them 1.5 pounds. So that's how we had it to work. So that's what we worked with. So then we said, can we make this better? We actually added somebody to the night crew in there to basically feed the sows at night. So we went to, back up. We went to 6 in the morning, 10:30 a.m., 2 to 3 in the afternoon, and 7:30 to 8 o'clock at night. Okay? We started that 1 year after we started the first one, which is the red right here. Stillborns, 0.46 and 0.39. All we changed was then the timing of when we fed those sows. Now, this farm has somebody in the unit till about 8 or 9 o'clock. We don't have excess crew to sleeve everything like we should. You know, they're hardly sleeving any sows. The biggest comment that came back, sows farrowed out in 40% less time. So think about it. If I'm giving her this constant supply of energy, when it's time to farrow, she's had some energy within a few hours of her farrowing. She converted that carbohydrates into sugars, and she's got energy to pop the pigs out. Makes a lot of sense what we look at. So something you can do without adding 24/7 in the farrowing house, and you can drop stillborns. Okay? So again, it's the first time I shared the second part of this one, but it's been 2 years of data and a 4,500, and these guys are good friends of mine. So it's something that happened. So we have lowered the stillborns that much. Okay? Other things we can do in the farrowing house, drying of the pigs. Again, if you're going to dry pigs, you got to dry pigs. Get them in there, you dry them with a towel, put them in some kind of a container. These are horse feeders right here. We put in a lot of barns. We can hang them up high so we can get the guy covered. Because remember, those pigs within 10 to 15 minutes of birth lose anywhere from 4 to 7 degrees of body temperature. The smaller the pig, the more body temperature he loses, and the longer it takes him to come back to normal. Okay? So if you've got limited people in the farrowing house, pigs you want to dry are the smaller pigs, the ones that are that under 2.5 pounds. If you don't have limited time, dry those pigs to make sure that they don't get the chilling factor. Again, split suckling. This, as total borns have gone up, I think a lot of people have forgot about that. Oh, she can take care of them. She's got more colostrum. And so split suckling is a key on these larger litters. And I got 2 slides that I really love, and this is one of them. If we had 10 pigs, we can get about 180 plus grams of colostrum into them. They need 100 minimum to live, 200 to really survive. So those first 10 pigs out, not a problem. Look at the 11th to the 15th pig, about 105. So right on the edge of that, just keeping him alive and surviving. Look at being number 16, 18 grams of colostrum. So where's that pig going to end up? Unless you do something, he's going to end up in the dead pig bucket. Okay, and part of these guys here. So anytime those first 10 pigs take care of themselves, they're going to get out first, they're going to get those front nipples, they're going to nurse, and as these guys come on, these guys are going to continue to occupy those nipples. These guys kind of work on the back end, the back nipples, and they're going to kind of fight for them. So split suckling is a key to getting colostrum distribution. And on the colostrum, it's preset before she starts to farrow, how much she's going to have. Okay? So whether she has 10 pigs or 20 pigs, she's got the same amount of colostrum for those. And it varies anywhere from about 2,000 grams to about 6,000 grams per sow. You don't know which one's got 6, you don't know which one's got 2. Okay? So then it's distribution of that colostrum among that litter of pigs is so critical we have to get done. I threw this one in. It kind of shows us basically if we get less than 100 grams of colostrum in that pig, which is about 3.5 ounces for us that work in ounces, our death loss was about 65%. If we can get 100 to 200 grams in there, which is about 3.5 to 7 ounces, we got down about 35%. If we can get at least 200 grams in them, we went under 10%. So that's the critical thing. Got to get 200 grams, 7 to 10.5 ounces of colostrum in that pig in that first 12, 15 hours after they're born. Remember, what happens to colostrum over time? It declines. By 24 hours afterwards, there's no colostrum. Okay? So we got to get the first colostrum in there quickly. Then the other thing is weight. And as I said, as these total born numbers have gone up from us, average birth weights have gone down. And there's a lot of you probably dealing with pigs under 2 pounds in your systems. So what do we need? What happens with those? So if that pig is under 1.8 pounds, which is 0.8 kilos, the death loss was about 42%. If they're under 1.3 pounds, which is 6 kilos, they're about almost 70% death loss. Once those pigs got to a kilo, which is about 2.2 pounds, we're about 25%. When they got up 2.6 pounds, 1.2 kilos, they were up to down to about 18%. Once those pigs got to 3 pounds in weight, yeah, survival numbers 10% or better. So size of pig has a huge amount to do with the survival number. Now, you guys that are feral to finish, if the hog market's not so good, do we need to be keeping these pigs here? We think the cutoff point is about 1.8 pounds. So anything under 1.8 pounds, first off, may not make it out of the farrowing house, and how well will they do in the nursery and the finishers? Those pigs are the 190-pounders when you're selling the 260s. Okay, so what are those worth today? What did you invest in them? Okay, so I think you've got to be nice to the pigs and utilize those pigs under 1.8 pounds. Now, what about the colostrum that they would have drunk? Now the other pigs can use that. Okay, so we need to redistribute the colostrum. So, nutrition-wise, what I see going on out there, I think there's lots of things going to have to happen. Gilt development on gilt diets. We can't take gilts off of finisher floors, keep them around 30 days and breed them anymore. We got to get a hold of them earlier. We got to develop them. Transition dieting and gestation and pre-farrowing. I spoke at a meeting in Manitoba last week. There was a guy from Denmark there who talked about transition dieting. It's a hot topic in Europe. Doing something going from straight gestation diet to lactation diet the day she farrows, right? Something for 1 to 2 weeks before they farrow, changing the diet, whether going to a lactation diet or going to some combination of that. I think you'll see something in probiotics or yeast or things that are in there. But now you're asking this sow, all of a sudden, have 14 or 15 babies and milk, right? And we changed her diet on the day she farrowed. It takes that whole gut system a long time to change over. What happens at Thanksgiving when you overload on Thanksgiving Day the next day? You feeling good? Same thing happening here. You know, they need time to switch it over. I got one unit I work with. We switch over 10 days pre-farrow. We actually move the sows. This is graded barns. We move the sows 10 days pre-farrow up to a section right next to the farrowing house. They go from gestation diet to lactation diet, 6 pounds. And we started doing that, and our weaning weights went up about 3/4 pound. Our survival went down about 2%. Our survival improved about 2%. And we have less kick-out, I call them, like P1s that don't milk well because they really can't stand all that transitioning feed and everything. If they've already seen lactation diet for 10 days, they transition right on, and we have less gilts that end up having to be pulled out and replaced with something else. So it works extremely well, but it's doing something different. Fleshing sows, or feeding sows based on age and production. Not all sows are producing the same. Do they need the same amount of feed in gestation or in lactation? If I got 14 pigs versus 10, there's a whole difference in there what needs to be fed to them and how much they need to get. Fleshing before breeding gilts and weaned sows. The biggest thing we saw in reducing wean to first service interval was feeding sows at least 8 pounds of diet from the day they're weaned until they're bred. They are deficient when they come out of the farrowing house, even if they've been on a self-feeder. They haven't got enough energy. But that extra energy boost will help them to cycle quicker and helps the farrowing rate and the subsequent total born. Ad-lib feeding and lactation. That's a must today. You know, as soon as she's done farrowing or maybe a day after, open it up. She'll determine how much she wants to eat. I'm having a good day. I'm going to shrink down 30 pounds. Oh, tomorrow I get 10. Same thing about Thanksgiving. You overate on Thursday, I'll undereat on Friday. Or I may not eat on Friday. But they each have their own balance. Some of them eat at night. Some of them eat several meals. Like a gilt, P1s, they get up and take a snack about every time after they lactate, after they nurse the pigs. Or older sows may eat it all up in one time. They all have these variations in habits. And the only way to satisfy the habits is just to have feed in front of her all the time. Quality of product, mycotoxin. I'm going to spend a little time on that in a second. And then least cost feeding of sows for optimum production. Least cost and optimum production do not need to be in the same sentence. Okay? We can't least feed these sows if we want to optimize production out of them. They're just a different critter. You know, that's like taking a Ferrari and putting diesel fuel or something. It's probably not going to perform well. Okay, same thing here. We got to get the diets to match up with the productivity. And mycotoxins. It's become one of my, if I was a little bit younger and wanted to go back to school, this is what I go back and work on, is mycotoxins. It's a huge thing. I don't think we understand the complexity of mycotoxins out there today and what they're really doing to us. I personally think some of our sow death loss and our prolapse problem is tied to mycotoxins. I'm really pretty convinced of that today after some of the farms we work with and some of the things we've changed to try to fix those. But again, when you look at some of the mycotoxins, carcinogenic, prolapses and abortions, feed refusal and vomiting, kidney damage, pulmonary edema, liver damage, all these things have a lot to do with it. And I know, is it fumonisin that you're seeing a lot of in Missouri now, if I remember right? Again, we've seen an issue with some underlying problems, nipple necrosis caused by that particular mycotoxin. Okay, not a pretty thing when we had it. Okay, so again, more testing needs to be done. Binders need to be in there that bind to the specific thing that you're looking at. Okay, so I think we got to do a better job with that. And then just look at the cornfield. How many, and when you go through there, how many of the ears now are erect in there, and this is what you see on the end of them. I think our corn genetic companies have not done us a good job as far as quality of product that we're going to feed to livestock. Maybe it's great for ethanol plants, but it's not good for livestock. Or contamination in bins. When's the last time you inspected the feed bin? And it's that black stuff that's on the side, that's probably not feed. Okay? Need to look at that. We got farms now that power wash out their bins. What about that drop tube? Did you ever look in the side of one of them? What's the stuff that comes out black at the bottom once in a while? It's not feed. Well, it was feed at one time. It's not feed now. Okay, so what are we doing to safeguard ourselves that we don't have contamination within the system as far as affecting the mycotoxins? A couple little bit on sow housing. This could have been me back in the 50s when I was born taking care of pigs, but this was taken in 2004. Different options out there now. Loose sow housing, just all different things that we see going on out there. There's a little less pressure, I think, today to go to loose sow housing, right? You haven't heard it in the press as much lately. We may have satisfied that niche market, big niche market, for sows that are not in gestation stalls. So what's going to happen there? But we have a lot of unanswered questions. You know, what is the size of farrowing crates we need today? What's the size of the gestation crate? Sow housing, gestation stalls, pens, or a combination. What about GDUs for growing and developing gilts? That needs to be something on lots of farms, put on the farms today so you can control your gilts. What about sanitation programs, washing the gestation? I've seen more dirty gestation barns the last few years than I've ever seen. Why is that? Don't have people. Don't have any people to take care of the sows every day. How are we going to wash stuff? But what about the buildup that happens in those barns? You know, along with getting through the cobwebs, but what happens to the equipment that's not cleaned and dust taken off of it periodically? So we got a lot to do to come back on that. And repair and maintenance. We got somebody that can do those things. I got a few slides on finishing. What time is it? How much time have I got left?
30 minutes.
What? 10:40. Okay. So we'll go pretty quick on these. So I'm on a few minutes for questions. We've done a lot of looking at finishing and nursery data. Basically, a thing has come out there, a lot of not very good data coming in and people not using it. And I just threw this in here. We did this was 2008 to 2018. This is a lot of closeouts we pulled together. And we put actually lines in here. These are 4 feed efficiencies. These are 2s. We know that's probably not possible, and that probably wasn't practical because the feed got somewhere else. So when we start to standardize a lot of these standardize some of the closeouts, try to get what real numbers are. And I'll share with you what's in our database. We break the database up into top 25%, next 25, 25, and bottom 25%. Okay? And we separate them out based on a 4-part variable. Average daily gain, adjusted feed conversion, culls and lights, and death loss. So we made an index out of that, and that's how we sorted the closeouts. Okay? So just a few key points. The top 25%, this is nursery. Average daily, adjusted feed conversion, 145. The bottom 25%, 186. Average daily gain 0.91, 0.63. Pigs came out, they all went in about 13 pounds. They came out top 25% at 53 pounds. They came out at 41 pounds on the bottom. And then this opportunity dollar says if they were all like the top 25%, this is what we're losing. So in this case, that bottom 25% is losing about $7.51 as far as extra feed costs, death loss, culling, and space utilization compared to the top 25%. Finishing is a little bit more. It's what interesting is my favorite one's right here. Average pig in there ate 854 pounds of feed, the top 25%. The bottom 25, 686. So 102 pounds more feed eaten by these pigs than these pigs. And the market weights were actually 7 pounds lighter. So is that inefficiency of the genetics, or is that 3.0 feed efficiency feeders? The feeder's over 5 to 8 years old. It's an old feeder. Okay? You need to reconsider where you're at on the feeders. And I'm going to throw in this one right here. This was a unit I work with up in South Dakota, and this is just a commercial test. They went in, they put in 4-hole wet dry feeders that fit 16 inches of width. These right here. The old ones were 5 to 6 hole, and they were that wide. Basically, the pigs gained 14 more pounds of gain just because they changed the feeder size in the same period of time. We didn't raise their feed efficiency, so we know they got to be more efficient. But just changing the feeders here, getting the width the pig needed to eat, we gained 14 pounds in the finishing period. So what's the new feeder worth? 14 pounds. That paid for a feeder pretty darn quick, right? Okay? I'll back up a little bit. Square footage. What do we need to have for square footage? This is some Brum data done from several years ago. So if my pigs are going to be at 300 pounds in there when they end up, for optimum growth rate, they need about 9.7 square feet. How many of you start them at 9.7? We start them more at the 7.2, right? So if we leave them at 7.2 square feet to 300 pounds, we lost about 8.6% of their potential growth rate. So we overcrowd a lot of our barns just because we got to put them in there, right? So that 1,200 head barn of 20 years ago is really a 1,000 head barn today if we're going to get optimum growth rate out of the pig. And I threw this one in. This is a K-State piece that just came out a little while ago. It was published in 19, and I like this because they basically went in and they gave the pig square footage. Let's walk through this real quick. The first set was they gave them 12.7 square feet. They put 14 pigs in the pen. At day 160, they marketed 14 pigs, and they weighed 377 pounds. The next one, they gave them 10.7, so they just put more pigs in that same pen. That's how they did the trial. So they marketed 17 pigs at 369 pounds. They had 8.8 at 20 pigs, 365. 7.7 square feet, 23, 359. So again, they're quite a bit lighter, but we had more pigs in there. Here's one at 7.1 square feet, where they started them. But they started pulling pigs at day 93. They took 3 pigs out at 93. They took 2 pigs out at 122. 3 pigs out at 147. Had 17 left at 160. 353 pounds. This one here, they only had 2 cuts in there. At day 108, they took out 3, and 147, they took out 3. 356. Why I read this out is if we go over here and we calculate pounds produced per square foot of pen, we had 42.96 pounds per square foot. Up here we had 25.9. So again, we can optimize those barns if we have a marketing plan that starts to pull out the heavy pigs sooner. We don't do it quick enough, okay, to give them more square foot so that they can grow. The other piece I put in there was looking at the difference in feed efficiency. And again, we basically, these pigs ate $7.20 less feed than these guys up here. That's a lot of money. Okay? Again, have a marketing plan. So when we load the pens, do we sort them out big, medium, and light? We random them. Take off the obvious smalls, stick them in a couple pens. We random because we want pigs to grow fast in each pen, right? So we can pull them out sooner. Okay? People. How many of you have adequate staffing of labor? Oh, we have one in the back. What's your secret?
We have good people who hire good people.
Okay. We know what to do. Most units, I walk in the door, do you know anybody? Well, we're only short 5 today. It's usually 6. Okay, so have a good day. So what are we doing for people? Again, I think it's back to hiring people, training, retention, rewarding, motivating, and understanding what the people really want. We have a different set of labor today in this younger labor force, right? They're not motivated like some of your older guys. We actually like to work. Really? You know, it's a job. If I don't like it, I can find another one, right? Well, I'm a little sick today. I don't think I want to show up. What about your coworkers who are going to have to pick up the load? Okay, so it's a whole different dynamic is what we're starting to see. And what's the quality of the labor force when we're at 3.2 unemployment rate? What's Missouri's? I don't know. Nebraska right now is at 2.2 unemployment rate. So there's no people. How many towns do you go through lately and you can't find a place to eat at night? Why? Restaurants can't find anybody to work at night. Okay, so labor's an issue. So it's going to continue to be a big, big problem for us as we move forward. I don't know a lot of the solutions. Kylie's probably got them back. We need to get her up here to talk about that. So that's what I got. I got a few minutes for questions. Yeah?
On your solid death loss chart, the top three parities, whatever your 50% of death, what's that percentage come out to be for the inventory? 16% of the inventory?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And the problem is everybody says my replacement rates went up. Yeah, they had to because I'm losing more animals today when I'm running 10% pre-weaning. So replacement rate have to go up to fix that. But it was funny. Over the last few years, we've seen that younger parities being a higher percent of the death loss. And is it bad gilt development, bad selection? What are we doing wrong? You know, we're pushing the hell out of them. We know that. But what are we doing wrong is causing that to happen? Okay. We're looking at a couple studies now. We're starting to look at, we're breaking up the data, the death losses into the gilt development section, then bred to farrow section, and then farrow to wean section. Kind of some real interesting stuff we're starting to see in that. And as we go forward, we'll probably share a little bit more of that as we're looking at.
Another question. On your top 10% of the farms, how many of the farms are batch growing?
There's 75 batch farms out of the 830-some that are in there right now. And I suppose 10% of them would be in the top 10%. Yeah, we've got several batch farms in the 30s. Yeah, if you work right with batches, that's a good thing to think about. Health-wise, we got the healthiest set of animals there, but replacement rates are higher when we have those. And we violate a few rules when we set those up right. But batch is something you got. If you're less than a 2,500 sow unit, batch is something you got to look at. Definitely have to look at. Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
What percent of that farm set is group cows in gestation?
I'm guessing probably 15 to 20%. Okay, a few years ago we wrote a study looking at housing. We tried to do it a couple years ago again, couldn't get much cooperation. So I'm actually now talking to some of the ESF farm suppliers about setting up some subsets of theirs. Okay, but when we did it back in 2014, we saw no difference between group sow housing and crates. And we work with a lot of group sow housing farms with sow death losses 7-8%. So we don't think that housing has a lot to do with this death loss thing. I think a lot of it's just managing the gilts, getting the right gilts, and foot care. There's pruner for $22 you can buy at Home Depot and cut trows with. Okay, you don't have to spend $10,000 for a lift station. There's also Milwaukee has a PVC cutter that's battery powered. I got a couple groups that's got them. I've never tried it yet, but that sounds like I need to have one of those, you know, to go in and trim. And the dew claws are the biggest thing we cut. Now, stalled barns we don't see as much, but in the loose sow housing barns, we got to do foot maintenance if we're going to keep things where we got to go. Okay. Yeah.
How much did you see temperature control being an issue?
Temperature as in?
Well, variation in numbers. You said the housing wasn't seen as much of an issue, but temperature spikes. Do you see that being a significant issue?
As far as in the like gestation or farrowing, you mean? Most of the farms anymore have cool cell pads that takes care of that. Most of the farms now. What's interesting, you get up into Minnesota and up into Canada now, which don't have cool cells. They're starting to have higher percent death losses now and more issues in August and September than they've ever had. Again, global warming is probably true. You know, it's getting hotter in those parts of the country. Now they're considering, even in Canada, what kind of cooling systems are they going to look at. So when we look at it regionally, we start to see not a lot of difference. Okay, but cool cell systems have helped hugely. Okay. Anything else?
Do you have any thoughts on the slat gap for loose housing? Is there an optimal?
Well, we moved into loose cell housing without researching slat gap. Basically, is how we did it. There's some Canadian waffle slats now that may look something. I think we got to go back and look at, I think the tops ought to be wider, and the slats even a little bit wider too, so we don't, those dew claws go right down and catch, and they come off when you come up. So I think it needs to be a little bit wider, but I think the tops ought to be wider. Okay, so there's no research I know of that's been done that I've seen that really tells us what's the right surface. We moved into something without researching it, yeah.
Is any of the foot problems, is that nutrition, any of that? I mean, are we feeding them on calcium, phosphorus, stuff like that, making more growth on that? Is that related at all?
I think a lot of it is on the gilts, is developing as gilts from 100 pounds on gilt diets versus finisher diets, which would be different calcium, phosphorus, and vitamin mixes. I think we got to get control of them then. And I think there's a nutritional component, that there's some minerals and stuff that can be added to help the quality of the hoof, for it's not as brittle, it's more pliable, so we don't see the busting and stuff that we see. So I think that's another component of this foot thing. Is there a nutrition? Selection, nutrition, and foot maintenance are all part of it. And I don't think, there needs to be more work done on it. But there was a paper several years ago where they fed gilts on developer diets versus finisher diets, and the quality of the foot scores that they gave them were a lot better on the ones that were on gilt diets. Okay, so I think that's part of it. Now, I know enough about nutrition to be a pain in nutritionist's bottom. Okay, so I read a lot of stuff, but I think there's things we got to look at that we haven't looked at yet.